If you've spent any time looking at the original plans for Walt Disney's experimental prototype community of tomorrow, or Epcot, you've probably found yourself imagining what it would be like if the city was actually built. What would it be like to walk its streets or ride the people movers? Unfortunately, we can't really deliver that experience here, but using a popular city planning game, Cities Skylines, we can try to get close. This is the first in a two-part series exploring what Epcot would have really been like through simulation. We'll be looking at design lessons we can learn from it and how effective at city planning it would have been in the next episode. Today, we're taking a tour to establish what is and isn't here and how our version compares to Walt Disney's ideas. Also, this should go without saying, but I feel it's necessary to add a disclaimer here. This is just a game. This is only for entertainment. There are some lessons we can draw from this, but they're broad at best, because this game isn't realistic. Also, the plans we're basing this on were practically first drafts. There's no saying whether the Imagineers could have fixed the problems that emerged from this design or not, or even whether those problems would have emerged in the real world. In his 1966 introductory film on the Florida Project, Walt Disney said the plans for Epcot would change, and in designing this model, we needed to make some changes. We strived to maintain as much of the original plan as possible, and when the game's rules necessitated we deviate from that, to try to keep the original's spirit and function. But let's imagine ourselves in a world where Walt managed to get his dream city built. It took until 1971 to even get the theme park open in the real world, but that was without Walt's guidance. Let's say that the city gets built and fully established by 1975, which will be the year of our visit. We start here, at the interchange of I-4 and the roads leading into the Disney property. This doesn't look too different from what is there in real life today, just a lot sparser. In the plans, however, there would have been an airport, multiple motels, and an area not too dissimilar to the larger Disney Springs area of the resort today, all located along this road leading into the Disney property. Unfortunately, in the game, we can't actually have a map that size. The larger game map spreads down to that interchange, but even with mods installed, we can't build anything down there. So instead, we've compressed that airport, motel, and welcome center into this, which we're calling the Transportation and Welcome Center. Over to the west side, we have a train station, an airport, and a unique building called the Space Elevator, which delivers the most tourists into the city out of any building available in the game. These are the main arrival points for tourists to our version of Epcot. These visitors represent the tourists staying in the motels, as well as other businesses of the airport and welcome center from the original plan. This is all located on roughly half the space allotted to the motel complex in the 1966 design, and the buildings aren't laid out at all like the plan, but again, out of necessity. They cover roughly a similar size of clearing, in the space where we can build, at least. Our transportation hub is filled with commercial space to represent the motels, shops, restaurants, and welcome center located here in the original design. These draw tourists as well as employing locals, which helps keep the traffic pretty realistic. There are no people movers down here though. Buses are the key mode of public transport, mostly used to get to and from the monorail station into the city. The car, unlike in the rest of Epcot, would be king here, and so buses make the most sense for moving people to the monorail. This is because the motel area in the plan has a large parking lot for over 10,000 cars, in addition to the parking for the motels and other businesses. Think of that portion of the 1966 plan as the original version of the modern Transportation and Ticketing Center, or TTC, near today's Magic Kingdom. We've tried installing some of the trains we're using to represent people movers in the rest of the city down here, but the game's pedestrians just preferred the buses anyway, so whatever. Let's return to our imaginary 1975. We've arrived at the airport in the morning and have taken a couple hours to go through the welcome center, check in, drop off our luggage to be delivered to our hotel room later, and now we make our way to the monorail. It's about 10 a.m., and we're going to a product demonstration at the industrial park before heading into the main city itself. Here in the industrial park, corporate partners have set up research and development labs as part of the project to make the experimental, in Epcot's acronym, a reality. New innovations in home design, appliances, entertainment, and every other aspect of modern living are developed here to be tested in the homes of people who reside in the city. We're here to see a demonstration by GE of their new washing machine. Or maybe it was RCA and their new CED video disc system. Maybe Boeing has developed a jet engine-powered lawnmower. Hey, Colin Furs, there's a free build idea. Regardless of what we're here to see, what we have in the game is pretty different from the plans. First off, there's not actually all that much in the original plans for the industrial park. There are a few pieces of concept art, but the actual laboratories / showrooms / demonstration centers / fabrication shops that the corporate partners would need to build are entirely up for debate. Each company would need significantly different capabilities from their building, and so design was likely going to rely on the corporations, with Disney's Imagineers having maybe some final level of sign-off on the design choices for building exteriors, but that's probably it for Disney's input. I mean, we don't even have evidence of a single company that confirmed their intent to build a lab in Epcot. The companies we referenced before were ones that had relationships with the Walt Disney Company over the years, but there's nothing to suggest any of them would have set up shop in the industrial park. Even plans for the layout of the area are pretty sparse. It seems that each spoke of the area was going to have 3 buildings at the end, with a people mover servicing a shared courtyard in front of each of them, and a ring road around the outside for deliveries and such. But in the game, the sheer amount of traffic generated by industrial areas means that we needed larger roads capable of moving heavier traffic. And that makes sense even for a real-world version of the plans. It's cute and all to mimic the design of the city here and have a majority of the plaza be a pedestrian space. But there's going to be a lot of large trucks using these roads to deliver the raw materials to build thousands of prototype products. Then there's the delivery and maintenance of said prototypes, all using the main highway, since it's the only way into the city. And those little ring roads around the back don't look sufficient for that level of traffic. That said, here's our solution. It doesn't look pretty, but it's actually decent at traffic efficiency. Using broad one-way roads to replace the smaller ring roads around the expo/industrial park, and adding the metro trains we're using to simulate the people movers, we still maintain the emphasis on pedestrian-capable traffic, while also keeping the large trucks moving. There are 2 monorail stations here, one on the east side and one on the west, but these are divided by direction of travel. Only northbound trains stop in the east station, southbound in the west. The area is split between office and industrial zoning, which is meant to reflect the laboratory and administrative use of the buildings in addition to fabrication, instead of the pure manufacturing of the game's industrial zoning. A web of sidewalks connects the area, allowing pedestrian traffic to be somewhat separate from the highways, and we can see that the monorail stations here are surprisingly popular. Before we move on with our visit to the Epcot City proper, I'd like to take a moment for a minor digression. It's worth noting that Walt Disney was kind of weirdly ahead of his time here. He was talking about a form of iterative development and rapid prototyping with consumer beta testing built in that wasn't really feasible in the 1960s like it is today. Cheap laser cutting, CNC machining, 3D printing, and affordable direct shipping didn't exist. today there are tons of companies that can use that and a little bit of seed funding from Kickstarter to launch a product. As a company, building a research and development lab here in Disney's new city meant access to over 5,000 households, with a split between urban and suburban living. The product testers living here are especially focused on progress and experimental development of new technologies, and they are already trained to give quality feedback on how your new product works out. Heck, at least some significant percentage of those involved in your test would be families of people employed by one of the companies here in the industrial park. An engineer from Boeing might find a tweak to that new GE dishwasher that was just installed in his home, and next year, jet-powered dishwashers are the hot new trend in home appliances. That kind of cross-pollination is unlikely to come from anywhere else in the corporate R&D world of the 1960s. But back to the video game. We're now heading toward the city itself. We have a lunch appointment at a special restaurant downtown. To get there, we ride the monorail through the outskirts of the city and into the city center. On our way, we see some of the suburban-style neighborhoods and the Greenbelt, where the majority of the city's services are located. The single largest element that's entirely missing in our model is what's labeled as Auto, Commercial, and Service Center in the plans. Its intended location is marked by its own zone in our Greenbelt, but it's hard to tell exactly what this was supposed to be. And actually there were two of these, one at each end of the city center. I suspect this would have been an all-in-one service plaza with gasoline pumps, food court / convenience stores, mechanics or repair shops, etc. Think of a truck stop or something like the service plazas on highways for an analog. But that's just speculation on my part. There don't appear to be any detailed descriptions of this part of the 1966 plans available anywhere. The most significant difference between the city center in the game and the city center of Walt's plans is the lack of the, quote, dome. This aspect has garnered a lot of debate in online discussions of the plans, but I think the concept art does a better job of explaining the idea than words can. Instead of an actual dome over the city center, the idea was more like using the roofs of the buildings as a green space or recreation area for those living in the city center, as well as hotel guests staying in the area. Walt also mentions in the Florida Project film that the city streets would be enclosed and air-conditioned, but still sunlit, which suggests the streets would have been topped with skylights. Just know that all of this area in the city center would have been indoors, though exactly how that would have worked, and if it could have worked at all, is definitely debatable. That said, this doesn't really have any effect on how our city functions, it's just aesthetic. So we're not going to worry about it too much. We exit the monorail in the center of the transit hub of Epcot. This is a tiered structure with truck deliveries and through traffic underground, then the people mover stations on top of that, then our monorail that we just exited, and finally the Cosmopolitan Hotel and Convention Center, where we'll be spending the night. This building would have resembled the modern contemporary hotel, with the monorail stopping inside of it, but on a much larger scale. Because of how the game works, our monorail station is adjacent to the hotel building, and our people mover stations are actually in the middle of the next block. Another key difference is the layout of the underground route for through traffic. First, trucks and cars are separated in the 1966 plan. This isn't possible in the game without mods, and even with them on, it doesn't serve the purpose of the original plan, as we'll see shortly. We also don't have the need or ability to put in underground parking lots like in the original plans, so those are missing as well. This innermost circle of the city is a combination of hotel, convention center, transit hub, and administrative offices. The space between the first circle and second circle is filled with businesses. These are analogous to the restaurants and stores planned for the International Shopping District, where each street is themed to a different country. Beyond that, Between the second and third circles are the high-density residential apartment buildings. This is where most of the city's population would live, and our simulation reflects that pretty accurately. According to Disney's plans, there would have been no cars or street traffic, except pedestrians and maybe the occasional golf cart, in the city center. That said, the game only lets us have buildings on roadsides, and the businesses here still need deliveries of goods to sell, so we can't just ban traffic altogether. Walt may have wanted to put all those deliveries underground, but it's just not possible in the video game. As it is, we've banned heavy trucks from the area, and the deliveries are being performed by small vans. We've also banned personal vehicles, but taxis are still allowed. And of course, so are city service vehicles like garbage trucks, ambulances, etc. It's not exactly as Walt wanted, but it's as close as we can achieve here. We'll save exploring the green space and residential area beyond the city center for next episode, but it's worth noting that there were two seemingly different designs that were floating around, one symmetrical and one not. We went with the former because there are more images showing that version in detail, and thus it was easier to replicate. The non-symmetrical version lives on in our interpretation of the residential municipality from the 66 plans, but again, more on that next time. From the monorail station, we walk to a street themed to the country of France. We eat at a French restaurant where all the cast members, or at least the ones we can see, are actually from France. Obviously, many people know that this area was the inspiration for the World Showcase in the real-world Epcot theme park. That extant experience is probably a pretty decent comparison for what this might have been like if this version were built. After lunch, we board the monorail and head towards the theme park and themed resorts area. This is the most significant deviation from the plans as far as areas we actually built go. The game just doesn't have anything to replicate a theme park. Well, outside of paid DLC, and even then that's not a great replication of a theme park. Nor can we replicate a themed resort very well. That said, Walt Disney World employed about 5,500 cast members when it opened in 1971. Our in-game resort area employs about 6,500, with more than 7,000 jobs available. This is pretty close to what we'd expect given the real-world numbers, since we're replicating all the themed resorts from the plans, which is twice the number that were actually built for opening day. The most important note on this area is that we stuck the specialty buildings that are the absolute most elite of tourist draws, as well as a lot of entertainment complexes and parks that also draw a lot of tourists, in this area of the city. We've got a theater, opera house, museum, aquarium, stadium, statues, and parks up here. All these places are roughly where the Magic Kingdom would have gone in the plans. We also added a special tourism breaker, which is designed to be extremely attractive for tourists, have a very large capacity like a theme park, and nearly max out the city's tourism draw with its stats. The way the game tracks tourist visits makes it impossible to make any claims about how accurate we are to history or to the plans. All we get are how many tourists arrive each week, but not how many leave, and there's no counter for the total number of tourists in the city at any given time. And tourists per week is even more meaningless than it might seem because the game's timescale doesn't correspond to anything sensible. It can take weeks of in-game time for a person to leave their house and go to the grocery store. So tourists that arrived last week won't even be to their destination before the game just stops counting them, which is not helpful. For the themed resorts, we've just mixed business districts with open park spaces between some one-way streets and named them all after some of the hotels from the original plans. Ever wonder why this body of water is called the Seven Seas Lagoon? That's because the resorts in this area were all supposed to be themed as various exotic locales found across the Seven Seas. These would have been a Thai-inspired Asian hotel, the Polynesian, called South Seas originally, a Persian hotel, and a Venetian hotel. We've added Egyptian and safari-themed areas to ours just to fill out space. The business districts here both draw tourists and provide those 6,000 jobs for the residents of the city. This echoes the planned idea that a significant fraction of the city's population would have been employed in the park or surrounding resort area. Since our theme park itself doesn't have many employees, this larger area of businesses helps fill out those numbers. The roads mark out a pretty accurate estimate of where these areas would have been based on the 1966 plan, and the monorail loop here is actually something added to mirror the real area today. The plan's monorail just dead ends up here. That said, the real Magic Kingdom of today is much closer to Bay Lake than this or what's in the plans. In fact, what's where the park was supposed to be, according to the 1966 plans, is a fire station. Neat. For the end of today's tour of Epcot, we spend the afternoon exploring the area around the themed resorts. We take a late dinner in a restaurant high up in the hotel, and we can see the fireworks from the theme park against the night sky. We'll spend tonight in the Cosmopolitan Hotel, and in the morning, we'll be visiting someone who lives out in the city's suburban area to see what that looks like. But that'll actually be part of the next episode. We'll also be checking out the residential municipality and some other odds and ends from the original plans. We'll briefly talk about how this model was made and how accurate it is to real-world scale. And finally, we'll look at what lessons we can learn from Epcot about city planning and how effective this design would have actually been. But for today, that's all we've got. We hope you enjoyed this episode of Sightlines. If you'd like to join us next episode for the conclusion of this visit to Epcot, make sure to subscribe so you won't miss it. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you then. Hey friends, thanks for watching all the way to the end of this video. Here's a couple more you might like, and if you would, please hit the subscribe button and the thumbs up. It literally costs you nothing except a few seconds, and it truly helps us make more videos like this one. An extra special thanks go out to the people helping us over on Patreon. It's because of their support that you're seeing this video right now. If you want to help the channel out even more, head over to our Patreon and check it out. You can find it through a link in the description. Thanks again for watching, and we hope you have a great day.